Donald Trump has blinked. After weeks of screaming, threatening war, and moving pieces around on a map like an 18th century conqueror, the President of the United States has bowed to international pressure. What is unfolding in Davos is not a diplomatic victory, no matter how desperately his propaganda machine tries to spin it. It is a humiliating retreat, clumsily disguised as success. Trump has officially withdrawn his threat to invade Greenland. He has backed off his February 1st tariff ultimatum. Why? Not because he suddenly discovered reason or respect for international law. He retreated because the world stood up to him. Canada invoked Article 5. Europe prepared its trade bazooka. Denmark made it clear they would choose war before selling off their sovereignty. Trump, a man who thrives on bullying, did what all bullies do when they finally get punched in the nose. He ran away and declared that he had won an imaginary prize. Just moments ago, Trump posted an announcement about what he is calling an infinite deal with NATO and Denmark. Look closely at the language of this deception. He did not announce a signed treaty. He did not present concrete security or economic terms. Instead, he unveiled a framework for a future agreement. This is Trump's signature phrase for nothingness. It is the same language he used for his health care plan that was always 2 weeks away, or the border wall Mexico was supposedly going to pay for. It is a cloud of smoke designed to conceal failure. Trump claims this solution, if completed, will be wonderful. That single word, if, carries the full weight of the lie. He is trying to sell the American people an empty box wrapped in gold foil, hoping we are dazzled by the word infinite and fail to notice there is nothing inside. This is not the art of the deal. This is the art of the retreat. We need to dissect the phrase infinite deal that Trump just hurled at the press. In the history of international diplomacy, there has never been a concept this absurd or this childish. When asked about the duration of the deal, Trump replied, "Infinite, no time limit, it's forever." That is not how international treaties work. This is not a fairy tale. Treaties have terms, timelines, review clauses, enforcement mechanisms. They are living legal documents, not magical scrolls. Trump's use of the word infinite reveals two deeply alarming truths. First, he has absolutely no understanding of how the world actually functions. He seems to believe that he can sign a piece of paper and own a landmass until the end of time. Second, and far more dangerous, he is attempting to manufacture a simulated reality for his supporters. He wants them to believe he has secured an eternal victory, an immortal legacy, when in reality he has merely escaped, by the skin of his teeth, a crisis entirely of his own making, with empty hands. The infinite part of this deal is not peace. It is the infinity of lies. Trump claims he got everything he wanted, including minerals and security guarantees. But just hours earlier, he was saying, we have to own it, that leasing is meaningless, that no one will defend something they only rent. Now he has reversed himself completely, accepting a vague framework, not even a lease, not even a signed agreement, and calling it the final deal. This level of shamelessness is an insult to the public's intelligence. He is banking on collective amnesia, hoping we will forget yesterday's blood-soaked invasion threats and celebrate today's so-called infinite peace. But the world does not forget. Diplomats in Davos are looking at him like a dangerous clown who just stepped back from a cliff he was moments away from throwing himself off. There is relief that war did not break out, but that relief is overshadowed by something far more chilling, the terror of watching a mentally unstable man hold the nuclear briefcase. Immediately, the regime's propaganda machine, led by Fox News, shifted into full damage control mode. They are now trying to rebrand this humiliating surrender as a stroke of strategic genius. Watch how they twist themselves into knots on air. They brought on former Ambassador Carla Sands to analyze the so-called infinite deal. Even she, a loyalist, could not hide her confusion. She openly admitted she had no idea what Trump had actually secured. She acknowledged that Trump previously insisted the U.S. had to own Greenland, yet now he is suddenly talking about a vague framework. That awkward hesitation exposes the core truth. No one inside the Trump orbit, not even his closest allies, knows what is actually happening. Everything is being decided on the impulsive whims of a man who is clearly losing control. Then came Caroline Leavitt, the regime's press secretary, who elevated deception into a dark art. She went on air and declared that anyone who doubts Trump simply isn't paying attention, claiming that he has personally resolved 8 wars. She completely ignored the fact that her boss had just been forced to walk back explicit invasion threats. She described Trump's unhinged, rambling, and confused Davos speech as well-received and inspiring. This is gaslighting on a national scale. They want you not to trust your own eyes. They want you not to trust your own ears. They want you to believe that the man shouting about Iceland from a global stage is a geopolitical mastermind. The blind submission of Levitt and Fox News is not merely political bias. It is active complicity in covering up the president's cognitive and strategic deterioration. They are selling out the truth to prop up a collapsing image. We cannot talk about what happened at Davos without addressing the elephant in the room, Donald Trump's visible cognitive decline. In the most important speech of his presidency before the global elite, where every word is normally measured and deliberate, Trump repeatedly and consistently referred to Greenland as Iceland. This was not a single slip of the tongue. It was a systematic confusion about the basic geography of the very territory he had been threatening to invade. He said things like, "They're not there because of us in Iceland," and "the stock market dropped because of Iceland." Imagine the horror of the Icelandic delegation sitting in the audience. Imagine the disbelief of the Danish officials. The man who wants to buy their country does not even know its name. When confronted, Trump's apparatus responded with yet another lie. Caroline Levitt shamelessly claimed that Trump was saying Iceland as a physical description and blamed listeners for being confused. This level of contempt for the public is staggering. We all have ears. We heard him say Iceland. The refusal to admit a simple mistake, replacing it instead with an absurd excuse, reveals deep insecurity inside the White House. They know he is slipping. They know his brain is leaking pudding, as the saying goes. But instead of seeking medical intervention or invoking the 25th Amendment, they have chosen to build a wall of lies around his decline. A president who cannot distinguish between two strategic nations, yet holds the power to launch nuclear war, is an existential threat to humanity. There was a moment in Trump's Davos speech that made the room recoil, not in fear, but in disgust, when he bragged that NATO leaders call him daddy, saying, "They love me. They call me daddy. He's our daddy." This is not the language of a statesman. It is the language of someone with a pathological psychological complex, craving absolute submission and viewing international relations as an abusive patriarchal dynamic. Trump does not want allies. He wants children who kneel, ask for allowance, and thank him for protection. His obsession with the word daddy reveals that he sees power not as responsibility, but as personal domination. Perhaps the so-called infinite deal with Mark Rutte is really just a deal about ego. Perhaps European leaders realized that the only way to stop this man from pressing the nuclear button was to stroke his ego. If the price of peace is calling Trump daddy behind closed doors, maybe they decided it was worth paying. And that is the tragedy of the modern world. The fate of billions now depends on whether global leaders can tolerate playing obedient children to an abusive father. International diplomacy has been reduced to a global family therapy session where everyone walks on eggshells to avoid triggering dad, a humiliation for America and a danger to the world. In the shadow of that madness, the presence of California Governor Gavin Newsom at Davos emerged as a beacon of sanity. He did not arrive merely as a state governor, he arrived as a kind of shadow president representing the other America, the America that still believes in democracy, science, and reality. Newsom did not hesitate to call out the dangerous normalization of deviance we are witnessing. He sharply criticized the cowardice of those trying to rationalize Trump's behavior, and when he said, "I should have brought knee pads for world leaders," he delivered a blunt message. Appeasement is not a strategy. It is surrender. Newsom is doing what Democrats and patriots must do, standing up straight. He refuses to play Trump's word games. He refuses to pretend that confusing Greenland with Iceland is normal. He refuses to accept that blackmailing allies is the art of the deal. The contrast between Newsom and Trump at Davos is the contrast between two visions of the future: chaos, lies, and narcissism on one side, clarity, principle, and dignity on the other. Newsom is reminding the world that Trump is not America, that there is still another America fighting to reclaim its soul, and his presence is a crucial reassurance to panicked allies. Be patient, we're still here, and we won't let him destroy everything. While this diplomatic theater plays out in Switzerland, an economic crime is unfolding back home. Fox News and Trump's propaganda machine are cheering that the stock market is on fire because of the so-called infinite deal. This is the most blatant market manipulation we have ever seen. Trump manufactures a fake crisis by threatening war to crash the markets, then resolves it with a fake deal to send them back up, and calls it economic genius. But who benefits from this roller coaster? Only speculators, insiders, and the ultra-wealthy. For ordinary Americans, the reality is far harsher. A rising stock market doesn't pay your rent, doesn't buy your medicine as Trump cuts health coverage, and doesn't lower grocery prices as supply chains remain unstable. Trump uses the Dow Jones as a smokescreen to hide the real economic pain. We are living through a jobs recession, a housing crisis, and a public health disaster, but Trump doesn't care. As long as the numbers on the green ticker look good, he declares victory. This is the cruelty of crony capitalism fused with fake populism, celebrating atop the suffering of his own voters, who are being lied to and told that corporate wealth will somehow trickle down into their empty pockets. In that same speech, Trump also displayed a staggering level of backward thinking about modern warfare when he declared that he would bring battleships back. He spoke nostalgically about ships like the Missouri, the Iowa, the Alabama, relics of World War II, and claimed he would make them 100 times more powerful. This is not military strategy. It is the bathtub fantasy of a child playing with toy boats. In an era defined by cyber warfare, drones, hypersonic missiles, and artificial intelligence, Trump wants to return to the age of massive guns and slow armored steel giants. Why? Because they are big, because they look intimidating, because they satisfy the aesthetic instincts of a showy strongman. Trump does not understand modern warfare. He does not understand that power today lies not in the size of a ship, but in technology, intelligence, speed, and adaptability. His desire to spend trillions of dollars resurrecting obsolete platforms would be a catastrophic waste of national resources at a time when the military urgently needs investment in cybersecurity and space. But who dares tell Daddy that his toys are outdated? Competent generals have been fired or forced out, leaving only sycophants willing to nod along, even if Trump demanded wooden battleships. This military ignorance, combined with diplomatic aggression, is a recipe for disaster if a real conflict ever erupts. The most important takeaway from this entire episode is this: the world is no longer afraid of Donald Trump. It has learned how to push back. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney invoking NATO's Article 5 and declaring readiness to fight to defend Greenland was not empty rhetoric. It marked a structural shift in the global order. For the first time in history, Western allies are actively preparing contingency plans against the United States itself, no longer viewing Washington as a security guarantor, but as a potential security threat. Europe has deployed special forces, Denmark has mobilized its military, and Greenland has prepared to resist. It was this resolve, the trade bazooka loaded by France and Germany, that finally forced Trump to retreat. He understands only the language of power, and this time the world spoke it louder than he did. The lesson is clear. You cannot appease a bully. You have to hit him in the nose. Trump's retreat on Greenland proves that collective pressure works, but it also leaves a permanent scar. Trust has been broken. Alliances have been strained. Canada and Europe will never lower their guard again. They will continue building independent military and economic strength to ensure that they are never again subject to American blackmail. And finally, as a grotesque final blow to the absurdity of this entire spectacle, Vladimir Putin entered the scene. Reports out of Davos revealed that Putin offered to contribute $1 billion to join Trump's so-called Peace Council. Where would that money come from? From Russia's frozen assets. Putin is effectively proposing to use sanctioned money to buy a seat at Trump's table, and Trump, perpetually hungry for cash, appears willing to take it. Look at the roster of this so-called Peace Council. Trump, Putin, Lukashenko, Netanyahu. This is not a peace council. It is a legion of doom. Trump's willingness to accept money from the chief adversary of Western democracy in exchange for political influence represents corruption at its most extreme. It legitimizes Putin's invasion, turns U.S. foreign policy into a subsidiary of authoritarian interests, and sells America's honor for a mere $1 billion, a pitiful price. Trump is transforming the United States into an accomplice to war crimes, all while wrapping himself in the fraudulent banner of peace. This is moral depravity of the highest and most unforgivable order. But make no mistake, the danger does not come only from shadowy deals with foreign dictators. The real threat, the sharpest blade, is the one Trump has now turned inward and pointed directly at the heart of the United States. This morning, in a rage after being humiliated by the world at Davos, Donald Trump posted a chilling message, a de facto declaration of war against the very democracy he swore to defend. He wrote, "When will we realize the enemy is from within? China and Russia are just boogeymen. The real threat is the United Nations, NATO, and this religion." He labeled the alliances that protect freedom as a cult. Stop and absorb the insanity of that statement. The President of the United States has just declared that Vladimir Putin, the man invading Europe, is not the enemy, while NATO, the alliance that has preserved peace for 75 years, is the real danger. He is laundering the reputations of foreign adversaries while branding democratic institutions and domestic allies as enemies. Why do this now? This is the oldest move in the authoritarian playbook. When you fail abroad, you create an internal enemy. When Trump couldn't take Greenland, when he couldn't bully Macron, he needed a new target to throw to his enraged base. And that target is the so-called deep state, the press, the opposition, and anyone who dares tell the truth. Calling supporters of the rules-based international order a religion or cult is peak psychological projection. Trump, the leader of a MAGA movement demanding absolute loyalty, a figure revered as a messiah by QAnon, now accuses defenders of the Constitution of being cult members. He is looking in the mirror and assigning his own sins to his opponents. And do not dismiss his repeated reposting of QAnon accounts this morning as random behavior from a confused man online. This is a deliberate dog whistle. QAnon is not just a political group, it is a dangerous conspiracy movement that believes Trump is fighting a global satanic cabal of child abusers and that the storm will one day come when his enemies are arrested or executed. By amplifying these voices immediately after his Davos failure, Trump is signaling to the most extreme elements of his base. The fight is no longer Greenland. The fight is here, at home. He is radicalizing his supporters, converting political frustration into the potential for violence. The consequence of this enemy within mindset is the total destruction of social cohesion. When a president says the greatest threat is not Russian nuclear weapons, but your neighbor who votes Democratic, he tears the nation apart. He legitimizes the use of state power to crush political opponents. If NATO and the UN are enemies, then what are those who support them? Traitors, and Trump has already hinted at what he believes traitors deserve: military tribunals, prison, and worse. We are approaching the threshold of a political purge, disguised as national security, with figures like General Milley, who warned of Trump's authoritarian instincts, now squarely in the crosshairs. This internal enemy narrative also serves as perfect smoke cover for economic failure and corruption. While families argue over QAnon fantasies, figures like Scott Bessent and Howard Lutnick are dismantling financial regulations, slashing social protections, and funneling national wealth to crony corporations. Trump wants you chasing imaginary monsters so you don't see the thieves carrying assets out the front door. Cultural chaos masks economic looting. The wild stock market swings driven by his tweets are not a bug. They are a feature, enriching insiders while crushing ordinary Americans' retirement funds. Ultimately, the pivot from invading Greenland to hunting enemies within reveals Trump's shrinking worldview. He has realized he cannot control the world, so he will try to control America with an iron fist. He would rather be king of a divided wasteland than president of a constitutional democracy. His bitterness, hatred, and paranoia are turning the White House into a besieged bunker, and from that bunker, the most dangerous orders are being issued. This is no longer just bad policy. It is a disturbed mind wielding ultimate power and dragging an entire nation toward the abyss with it. Ladies and gentlemen, do not be fooled by the headline "infinite deal" or by the green numbers flashing on today's stock ticker. What we have just witnessed was not a victory. It was a convulsion of a regime that is morally and intellectually collapsing. Donald Trump failed to seize Greenland, but he succeeded in humiliating the United States and damaging the global order. He proved that he is not only a bully, but a weak one, someone who runs when confronted with resistance and lies to cover his own cowardice. But the danger is not over. A wounded and humiliated beast is far more dangerous. He will look for another target to vent his rage. He will search for a new way to assert his daddy power, and we must be ready. We must remain vigilant, continue exposing the lies, and continue standing with the truth. Truth is our most powerful weapon in this fight against madness. Subscribe to the channel, share this message, and help us keep the flame of truth burning bright. Do not let them normalize the abnormal. Do not let them turn lies into reality. We deserve better. America deserves better. Just moments ago, Trump posted an announcement about what he is calling an infinite deal with NATO and Denmark. Look closely at the language of this deception. He did not announce a signed treaty. He did not present concrete security or economic terms. Instead, he unveiled a framework for a future agreement. This is Trump's signature phrase for nothingness. It is the same language he used for his healthcare plan that was always 2 weeks away, or the border wall Mexico was supposedly going to pay for. It is a cloud of smoke designed to conceal failure. Trump claims this solution, if completed, will be wonderful. That single word, if, carries the full weight of the lie. He is trying to sell the American people an empty box wrapped in gold foil, hoping we are dazzled by the word infinite and fail to notice there is nothing inside. This is not the art of the deal. This is the art of the retreat.